this Learn English with the News lesson, we're going to read a science article together to help you improve your English vocabulary, grammar, reading, writing, listening, and of course, your speaking. Welcome back to JForrest English. Of course, I'm Jennifer. Now let's get started. Our headline, how microplastics are infiltrating everything you consume. First, let's review the verb to infiltrate. Here you see it in the present continuous because it's taking place now. When something such as microplastics, tiny plastic particles, infiltrates something else, everything you consume, it means it enters or spreads into, but often in an unwanted or unexpected way. Now, of course, you don't want microplastics in your water. In this context, consume means everything you eat or drink. But the verb to consume more broadly means to use. I could say this computer consumes a lot of power, electricity. We commonly use consume with resources such as energy, fuel, time, money. Here's a sentence you might relate to. Learning English consumes my weekends. So it uses all your time and maybe your energy. That could be another resource on your weekends. You can replace this whatever time reference you want. Consumes my nights, consumes my mornings, consumes all my time. So if learning English consumes a lot of your time or energy, put that's me, put that's me in the comments. And keep in mind, this isn't necessarily a bad thing, a negative thing. You could enjoy this. And notice the grammar here. This is a gerund statement. It's a general statement. Now, the subject in gerund statements are conjugated as it, which is why we have this S. It consumes my weekends. Don't worry about taking notes because I summarize everything in a free lesson PDF. You can find the link in the description. Now let's continue with the article. Microplastics have infiltrated. So notice here, this is in what verb tense? The present perfect. So it's a completed past action, but there is a result in the present. The result is that we consume them. It affects the environment. So that's the result, the present perfect. Microplastics have infiltrated every part of the planet. They have been found buried. So notice the pronunciation here does not match the spelling. Buried, buried. So the pronunciation is just like a strawberry or a blueberry, berry, but then in the past simple, buried. Now, bury, of course, is when something is below the surface, under dirt. They have been found buried in Antarctic sea ice within the guts of marine animals inhabiting the deepest ocean trenches. To inhabit means to live in a place. It can describe humans, animals, other plant species even. Within the guts of marine animals inhabiting the deepest ocean trenches and in drinking water around the world. Plastic pollution has been found on beaches of remote uninhabited. So if inhabiting means to live in a place, then makes it the opposite. So uninhabited means that nobody is living on these islands. Another word for that would be deserted, deserted, not desert, deserted, deserted. And notice the pronunciation here. Island, island. So there's no S here, but to make it plural, you would pronounce that S. Islands, 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 islands. And it shows up, so it being plastic pollution, it shows up in seawater samples across the planet. Here, the phrasal verb is to show up, which means to appear. So plastic pollution appears in seawater samples. The phrasal verb to show up is very commonly used. It also has more of the meaning of come, to come. So similar to appear, to come. Do you think she'll show up to the meeting? Do you think she'll come to the meeting? Do you think she'll show up? Or you might ask, how many people showed up last night? How many people came last night? Are you enjoying this lesson? If you are, then I want to tell you about the Finally Fluent Academy. This is my premium training program where we study native English speakers from TV, movies, YouTube, and the news so you can improve your listening skills of fast English, expand your vocabulary with natural expressions, and learn advanced grammar easily. Plus, you'll have me as your personal coach. You can look in the description for the link to learn more, or you can go to my website and click on Finally Fluent Academy. Now let's continue with our lesson. But they aren't just ubiquitous in water. What is the they? Well, we always want to look to what our last subject is. Often we have to remind ourselves, and our last subject was actually plastic pollution, which is it. So that doesn't match. So we know that they represents microplastics. In a situation like this, it would be best to say, but microplastics, because it isn't actually the last subject mentioned. So that's just something to keep in mind. You can replace your noun with the pronoun, just make sure it's known. But they, microplastics, aren't just ubiquitous in water. Ubiquitous means found or existing everywhere. We commonly use this with things in our daily lives. Cell phones are, of course, ubiquitous. Perhaps we can say ChatGPT is becoming ubiquitous in the workplace. So this is in progress now simply because it's a new technology. You could argue ChatGPT has become ubiquitous or is ubiquitous. So you can use to be ubiquitous. Become is that transition from not to. So what do you think? Is it becoming or has it already become? But they aren't just ubiquitous in water. They are spread widely in soils on land too, and can even end up in the food we eat. The phrasal verb end up is also very commonly used by native speakers. It's definitely one of the most common phrasal verbs in my vocabulary. Now, it is used to say to be in a particular place, situation, or condition, but to finally be. So it's really talking about the end result. Now, the end result can be unexpected or unintentional as well. So often it's not planned from the beginning. So it wasn't planned to put microplastics in the soil. They ended up there. Now, in an everyday situation, it's very common to ask someone, oh, what did you end up doing last night? Now, you can ask someone, what did you do last night? But if you say, what did you end up doing last night? It sounds like you previously talked to that person and they had a few different things that they were considering. So you want to know, which one did you choose? So which particular place or situation or condition did you finally end up in, finally found yourself in? Now, you can reply back and simply say, I stayed home, or you can say, I ended up staying home. Now, up is a preposition, so you need to use the gerund verb after. That's why before I said I stayed home in the past simple. I ended up staying home and reviewing my weekly JForrest English lesson. So it sounds like you made this decision at the last minute, or maybe unexpectedly, unintentionally. You didn't plan it in advance and you were considering other things as well. So perfecting this phrasal verb may consume your weekend, but trust me, it's worth it because it is such a common phrasal verb and it will help you sound very natural. Okay, let's continue. Unwittingly, do you know what this means? This means without knowing or planning. So we may be consuming, remember, eating or drinking tiny fragments of plastic, microplastics, with almost every bite we take. But of course, we're not doing this on purpose. We're not planning to do this. We might not even know we're doing this. So that's the unwittingly. You can also put unwittingly before your verb because it's an adverb, but it is commonly found at the beginning of the sentence to introduce the sentence. Now, notice this use of this modal verb. It's important because we may be. This just means there's a chance. It could be a 50% chance, 60% chance. We don't know, but we may be consuming. It isn't guaranteed. It's just a possibility or a chance. And remember, grammatically, it's modal plus base verb. I see a lot of mistakes with this, modal plus base verb. The backlash against single-use plastics. So single-use plastics, you may know what this means because it's very common in the news these days. It's a plastic bag that you use once and then you throw it away. That's a single-use plastic. So it's not a reusable plastic. Now, let's look at this. The backlash against something. Backlash, this is a noun. It represents negativity and criticism and public negativity and criticism. Now notice, against something. Let's review this example. The company received a lot of backlash. So remember, backlash is a noun. It's commonly used with the verb to receive. But in this case, it could be a company or a person or a policy even. The company received a lot of backlash, received a lot of criticism or opposition when the public found out, phrasal verb, which means discovered, when the company found out it doesn't recycle. It being the company doesn't recycle. Now, using the style of speech here, I could take this sentence and change it to the backlash, the opposition, criticism against the company for not recycling. This is the reason why the company received backlash. So the backlash against the company for not recycling caused its stock to plummet. So this part is not in the first sentence. So caused is the reason why its stock, so the shares of the company that are publicly traded in the stock market, caused its stock to plummet, to decline sharply. So a large decline, and it happened quickly. That is the word plummet, which is commonly used with the stock market. Backlash is a very common term you'll hear in the news. Let's continue. The backlash against single-use plastics. So now it's not a specific company, it's the actual plastics that are receiving a lot of public criticism and opposition. Has seen many companies seeking to use alternatives to single-use plastics, alternatives that claim to be more biodegradable or compostable. But in some cases, these alternatives may actually be compounding the microplastic problem. So compounding means it gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger gradually over time. So the problem being the microplastics problem, so that gets bigger and bigger and bigger, even though alternatives may seem to be better, but because there are other issues with them. But again, notice the use of this modal may be. These are important words to notice because it changes the meaning. It takes us from a factual statement to just something that is a possibility but not fact. So it's very important to notice modals when understanding the meaning of something. And again, remember modal plus base verb, even though it's separated by actually, we still need modal plus base verb. Let's continue. Research has found that bags labeled as biodegradable can take years to disintegrate. So if something disintegrates, it goes from its whole piece, so a whole bag, and then it breaks down until it is nothing, until there is nothing left. That would be disintegrate. So it can take years to disintegrate. And even then, they mostly break down into smaller pieces rather than their component chemical parts. So this is the reason why the alternatives may be compounding the problem, making it worse, because they don't fully disintegrate, go to zero. Now here, this use of breakdown into smaller pieces is the definition of disintegrate. So notice this phrasal verb, to break down. So you take something that's whole and then it separates into smaller and smaller and smaller pieces. This meaning of breakdown is commonly used as advice to someone who has a large problem or a large challenge or even a large goal, such as becoming fluent. That is such a big goal, it may be difficult to stay motivated to work toward it. But if you just break it down, so you take the whole piece and you turn it into smaller pieces, and then you can focus just on increasing your vocabulary to the most common 500 words, then 1,000 words, then the 5 most common verb tenses, then the more advanced idioms. So you just focus on one part at a time. So I gave the example, let's break the problem down, or let's break the goal down and focus on one aspect at a time. So this is often offered to advice to someone who feels overwhelmed by something so large, a problem, a project, a goal. Just break it down, just break it down. Swapping out plastic packaging for glass. So to swap out means to replace one thing with another. So you take your plastic and then you replace it with glass. That would be to swap out. So if you are following a recipe and you don't have any milk, you might swap it out for an alternative. So that would commonly be used in baking or in following a recipe. Swapping out plastic packaging for glass could potentially help to reduce exposure. So in this case, exposure is how you come in contact with microplastics through what you consume, the food you eat and the beverages you drink. But notice this use of could potentially, again, these modals tell us this isn't a fact yet, it is just a possibility. So again, we have modal, could help, but potentially makes it sound, again, just more like a possibility, not a fact. But it would also have environmental repercussions. So repercussions, these are negative consequences or negative impacts of something. Often parents say to kids, your actions have repercussions, meaning when you do something, there could be negative impacts or effects because of that action. So in this case, the repercussions, the negative effects, are on the environment. And notice here, but it would also have environmental repercussions, as glass has a higher environmental footprint than plastic. Footprint means the lasting effect. So the environmental footprint is the impact on the environment over a longer period of time. And this uses the modal would. It would have an environmental repercussions. So in this case, it's presenting the repercussions as a fact, but it's a hypothetical situation. So these repercussions will only happen if plastic is swapped out for glass. So this situation isn't a fact, it's a hypothetical, but the impact, the environmental repercussions are offered as being a fact. Let's continue. Fortunately, some good news. I know
what follows will be positive because fortunately is used to introduce something positive. Fortunately, there is some hope. Researchers are developing a number of approaches to help get rid of the plastic pollution in our environment. If you get rid of something, then you remove it permanently, you delete it. In the context of a computer, if I were to get rid of this text, I deleted it. I just got rid of it. If I wanted to get rid of this shirt, I would give it to Goodwill, where clothes are recycled, because you don't want to throw it in the garbage. That creates waste, right? So I can give it to someone else, and then it is no longer mine. So that's how you get rid of something. And in this case, they are developing a number of approaches. So a number of, it is many or some. So if you say, I have a number of tasks to do, it means I have some tasks or many tasks. Just remember that the noun that follows this is plural because it means some, many, there's more than one. Developing a number of approaches to help get rid of, permanently remove the plastic pollution in our environment. One approach has been to turn the fungi, so notice here, fungi, this is the plural of fungus. Fungus is one, and then fungi is two or more. There are actually a lot of funny shirts and jokes about this word because the pronunciation is fun guy. So there's a lot of jokes with this. You might see it sometime and wonder why this is on someone's shirt. Okay, it has been turned to fungi and bacteria that feed on plastic. Breaking it down, so remember to break something down, so we take the plastic and the fungi and bacteria, they cause it to go into smaller parts. So that would be breaking it down in the process. A species of beetle larvae. So here, larvae is the irregular plural of larva, and you have the egg, so the egg for the beetle, and then the beetle hatches, but it's not a developed beetle. So it's in between being an egg and a full beetle. That describes larva, the larva stage of certain species such as beetles. Remember, this is the irregular plural. Larvae, the singular is larva. A species of beetle larvae that can devour polystyrene. So devour means to eat a large quantity of, or to eat something fully and completely, usually in a short period of time. So if you're really hungry, you might say, oh, I could devour a hamburger right now. So you can use it more hyperbolically in that sense. But in this case, it's more of a literal meaning. Now, to be honest, I don't know what polystyrene is. I assume it's some sort of chemical that is found in plastic, perhaps, just based on the context of this. So the beetle larvae that can devour polystyrene, eat a large amount of it or in a short period of time, has also offered another potential solution. Again, this use of potential, it isn't a proven solution yet, it is a potential solution. So that word is important. Let's continue. Others are looking at using water filtration techniques or chemical treatments that can remove microplastics. So again, they're offering this as another potential solution. Others, I assume, means other researchers or maybe even other companies are doing this. And let's review this phrasal verb, to look at something. This means you're considering it or exploring it as an option. And this is our verb look, conjugated in the present continuous. We have our preposition at, so that's why your next verb is in the ing form. Here's an example that might resonate with you. I'm looking at ways to expand my vocabulary. So I'm exploring different ways, different options I'm looking at, and it's in progress now. So that's why it's in the present continuous. So the something is ways to expand my vocabulary. And then maybe you add on, so far, learning English with the news has been the most effective method. And think of everything that you've learned today. So hopefully you do find this an effective method. And that's the end of the article. So what I'll do now is I'll read the article so you can also improve your pronunciation at the same time as your vocabulary. And we've also discussed a lot of grammar as well. So I'll read the article now. How microplastics are infiltrating everything you consume. Microplastics have infiltrated every part of the planet. They have been found buried in Antarctic sea ice, within the guts of marine animals inhabiting the deepest ocean trenches, and in drinking water around the world. Plastic pollution has been found on beaches of remote, uninhabited islands, and it shows up in seawater samples across the planet. But they aren't just ubiquitous in water. They are spread widely in soils on land too, and can even end up in the food we eat. Unwittingly, we may be consuming tiny fragments of plastic with almost every bite we take. The backlash against single-use plastics has seen many companies seeking to use alternatives that claim to be more biodegradable or compostable. But in some cases, these alternatives may actually be compounding the microplastic problem. Research has found that bags labeled as biodegradable can take years to disintegrate, and even then they mostly break down into smaller pieces rather than their component chemical parts. Swapping out plastic packaging for glass could potentially help to reduce exposure, but it would also have environmental repercussions as glass has a higher environmental footprint than plastic. Fortunately, there is some hope. Researchers are developing a number of approaches to help get rid of the plastic pollution in our environment. One approach has been to turn to fungi and bacteria that feed on plastic, breaking it down in the process. A species of beetle larvae that can devour polystyrene has also offered another potential solution. Others are looking at using water filtration techniques or chemical treatments that can remove microplastics.
Do you want to keep learning English with the news? If you do, put let's go in the comments. And of course, make sure you like this lesson, share it with your friends, and subscribe so you're notified every time I post a new lesson. And you can get this free speaking guide where I share 6 tips on how to speak English fluently and confidently. You can click here to download it or look for the link in the description. And here's another lesson I know you'll love. Watch it now.